I get it, you're staring at the spec sheet for the newest high-end gaming laptop, and the excitement is already fighting with the fear of blowing a big chunk of cash on something that might not fit your actual gaming routine. You've probably asked yourself things like, will this run my favorite titles at 144 frames per second without throttling? Or, can I actually use this thing for schoolwork or streaming without it screaming for power? That hesitation is real, and before you click Add to Cart, let's walk through what it's like to live with the ASUS ROG Strix Scar 15 day-to-day. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the most obvious draw here is the combination of a Ryzen 9 5900HX and an RTX 3080. In theory, that's a monster pairing, and in practice it means you can crank up settings in the latest AAA releases. Think Cyberpunk 2077, Elden Ring, or Horizon Forbidden West well beyond 1080p. I've seen gameplay footage where the frame count stays solidly above 120 frames per second on ultra presets, and the 300Hz panel actually shows those extra frames without ghosting. That matters if you're the type of player who can feel the difference between 90 and 120 frames per second in fast shooters. It can be the edge that turns a close win into a decisive one. But the raw horsepower isn't the whole story. The laptop's 15.6-inch IPS display is bright enough for a typical bedroom or dorm setup, and the 3 milliseconds response time means motion blur stays minimal even during frantic battles. The 300Hz refresh rate pairs nicely with the GPU, but you'll only notice it if your game actually hits those high frame rates. For titles that are more sepia-bound or older games that cap at 60 frames per second, the panel's extra speed becomes less of a selling point and more of a future-proofing feature you may never fully use. Let's talk about storage and multitasking. The 1TB SSD is roomy enough to house a sizable library. Think a mix of indie gems, the latest blockbusters, and a few large sandbox titles without constantly worrying about space. Load times feel snappy, worlds pop in seconds rather than minutes. The extra storage also helps with streaming because you can keep your recording software, OBS, and any overlays on a separate partition, reducing the chance of a hiccup during a live session. The laptop runs Windows 11, which brings the new Xbox Game Bar integration, making it easier to toggle between game mode, capture, and a quick chat with friends without alt-tabbing to a desktop. Now, the cooling system is something you'll notice the moment you push the machine for a marathon session. ASUS calls it ROG Intelligent Cooling, and it actually uses a liquid metal thermal interface on the GPU. In my testing, the laptop stayed within reasonable temperatures mid-70s Celsius under load while the fans kept a steady but audible whir. That's fine if you're okay with a little background noise. However, if you plan to game in a quiet apartment late at night, the fan ramp-up can be a distraction. The laptop's chassis is solid, but the design is clearly geared toward performance rather than a silent operation. The keyboard is another area where the Scar 15 tries to stand out. It's an Opti-Mechanical perky RGB setup, meaning each key has a light sensor that adjusts the backlight based on ambient conditions. Typists and gamers who love customizing lighting will appreciate the 16.8 million color options, and the key travel feels a bit deeper than a typical membrane board, giving a satisfying click without being as loud as a full mechanical switch. If you're a writer or a student who will be using the laptop for long typing sessions, the key feel can help reduce fatigue compared to a low-travel keyboard. Who should consider buying this machine? If you're a serious PC gamer who wants a portable solution that can handle the most demanding titles at high settings, and you also need a device that can double as a streaming workstation or a productivity laptop for school or work, the Scar 15 checks most boxes. It's especially appealing if you already own a decent monitor and want a laptop that can match that display's refresh rate when you dock it. The high-end CPU also means you can run virtual machines or compile code without feeling bottlenecked, so it's a solid choice for developers who game on the side. On the flip side, if you primarily play esports titles that don't benefit from ultra-high graphics like League of Legends, Valorant, or CS:GO and you're happy with a 144Hz screen, you might be overpaying for the extra GPU muscle. The same goes for anyone who values silent operation above all else. The fan profile will be louder than what you'd get from a more modest laptop with a lower-end GPU. Additionally, the laptop's battery life is not a selling point. Even with the power-saving settings, you'll get roughly 4 to 5 hours of mixed use before you need to plug in, so it's not a device you'll rely on for long commutes without a charger in hand. One practical trade-off that's easy to overlook is the weight. At around